YouTube live streaming. Okay. So we can wait for another 4 minutes. Indian Standard Time. So wait for another 5 minutes or 4 minutes. Chandra, sir, can you share your presentation now?
Yeah, we can.
That first slide can be there, right?
Is there visible?
Not yet, sir.
Can you see it?
No, sir. Actually, ma'am, can you see? No.
No. Yes, now only it's getting.
Okay.
Yes, we could see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam, can start recording, madam. Okay, ma'am, would you like to start?
Yes, sir. Prepared. I think we can start at this side.
Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Recording
Greetings. Greetings and good evening to one and all present here. On behalf of the organizing units CSI, Computer Society of India, ACM and IEEE, I extend a warm welcome to our speaker, Mr. Chandra, members and my colleagues from the organizing units and the participants joined the Google Meet meeting and those watching the webinar Digital Disruption Impact on Financial Services through the YouTube live streaming. We have seen exceptional growth in the digitization of financial services during the last decade on account of Digital India initiative and growth in information technology, communication, mobile and internet services, which has virtually created disruptions. This digital disruption has transformed the financial services industry, revolutionizing operations, customer engagement, and service delivery. The convergence of technology, data, and changing consumer expectations has given rise to innovative solutions that are reshaping the financial services landscape. Key aspects of digital disruption include customer experience, fintech innovation, AI, algorithmic and data driven insights, open banking and APIs, cybersecurity and risk management, and regulatory changes and compliance. Today's presentation will provide insights on financial industry trends, emerging opportunities, technologies, and steps to stay ahead of the curve. Now, it's my pleasure to formally introduce our speaker, Mr. Chandra, who is known to many of us few decades. Mr. Chandra has over 30 years of experience and worked with global financial technology providers in senior technology and management roles. Mr. Chandra has managed YOI R&D budgets of over $250 million and brought in best practices in product management and implemented RAD processes, leveraging smart coding tools and AI, leading to a saving of over 30% in budgetary spending, besides accelerated product releases for global markets and financial services. Mr. Chandra is on the advisory board of few global technology companies, advising them on the technology transformation of products and services. Mr. Mouli is the co-founder and director at Pi1 Technologies, a digital transformation consulting service provider. He has the rare distinction of being the recipient of Eminent CIO Award for 5 consecutive years from 2018 to 2022. With this brief note on today's webinar topic and about the speaker, may I now request Mr. Chandra to enlighten us on the impact of digitization in the financial services. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, everyone. I think my sincere thanks to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present my experiences on the digital, particularly, and more so in the financial services. Just as a matter of caveat, I think this is by no means an exclusive in-depth into what each of those industries are doing, whether it is the technology or the financial services. So it gives you a bird's eye view of what's happening. And any specific questions that you have, I should be in a position to address it at the end of the presentation. And any detailed information that you may require, to whatever knowledge that I know, I can perhaps take it offline after the call, either on an email or on a phone or whatever that could be possible for you. So primarily, as explained by Madam, I think what I do is primarily right now I'm advising a few startups and companies, primarily as an advisory board member. One, I'm running an InsurTech program with an American product vendor. I'm trying to transform their products and services for the third time in the last 15 to 20 years. Trying to stay ahead of the curve on the insurtech, and also similarly a couple of other fintech vendors in India, primarily around their journey about developing products and things like that, actually, and also advise a couple of other health tech startups in their journey in their adoption of health technology on health. Actually, that's what I do right now. Before we start, I think primarily I just wanted to tie up the loose ends and also to give you an idea about what this financial services is about and where technology fits in and how do I go from there. So it's too difficult a job to define in one screen what industry should look like. So however, I picked up 5 major participants, which is one is the asset management, the others are the depositors or anything around the trading or the capital markets, and then there is an insurance and the financial technologies and payments. Actually, these are 5 broad headings if we look into any way, look at it from an industry standpoint, and there could be other subsegment of these things. You can classify them in many ways, either on a buy side or a sell side or into by a function, say like a front office, back office, middle office kind of a scenario, or looking at things like a matter of personal finance, consumer finance, or corporate finance. So there is no hard and fast rule about how you define all those things, but from a regulatory standpoint, each and every country has a different ways of looking at things. And there are specific regulators trying to regulate the industry. For example, the Reserve Bank in India regulates the banking industry. The IRD regulates the insurance industry. And there are things like pension funds and so on and so forth, which are all driven by other regulators, or there could be convergence of regulators also looking into all these things. So it's difficult to put it in a one single bucket in one way or the other, but the industry landscape is very vast. So what would be important to understand is what are the changes that are happening and why we are today talking about the disruption that's happening both in the industry and also leveraging technology. One is, as we all know, we are in the era of AI, actually. So there is a fundamental disruption because of technology itself. The OpenAI itself has transformed our thinking process in the last 6 to 7 months. That is opening up more opportunities, which I'll be giving you a bird's eye view of those impact on the fintech area. And arising out of that, there is a significant amount of cost and the competitive pressures because almost everything that we know of right now can be done in different ways using technology. Particularly financial services is highly amenable to technology use and how we blend technology and finance. Today, almost any bank is as good as a technology vendor, or an insurance is a technology vendor as much as they do insurance or banking. So there is a fine line of what is technology and what is business. I think that has evaporated. And from another perspective, say like a country like India, there is a significant portion of demographics which is skewed towards largely a very young population. And their consumer expectations. See, we all know that we are in the mobile age right now. So almost anything that we do, which had been predominantly been using a computer or a laptop or whatever else, I think it is now trying to be done anytime, anywhere kind of a scenario. And for the Western societies, I think there is a significant amount of aging population. And we have other means of reaching out to them in terms of providing technologies. We'll come to the risk part of it later, but I think these are some of those mega trends that are driving. So the opposite of all these things is leading with risks, actually. So the regulators always do a catch-up because once some kind of a risk happens because of volatility or due to some kind of a fraud or something around, I think the regulators jump in and tighten up those loopholes. So which is driving, again, more changes that needs to happen in terms of oversight and things like that. And on top of it, economic events, say like the war or the pandemic, is also trying to drive other economic uncertainty, which is leading to impact on capital and which requires you to intervene in many ways to stay protected in the financial markets. And largely the new kid on the block is the environment actually. So there is a significant amount of investments that are going into the environment to stay us ahead of the of all the problems that we are looking at it the from a global perspective. I think now the ESG is the new terminology that people are trying to use it, environmental, society, and governance actually. So I think these factors really go into in terms of a decision making. So you look at climate change, you look into how to try to do disruptive technology, say something like the electric cars or the electric vehicles, which is driving a disruptive change in the automobile, not only in the automobile, but even in the field of insurance. For example, what is a fine line of warranty versus maintenance or any kind of insurance? So I think almost many things that we talk about financial services are changing from that perspective because the investments or the technology-driven changes are driving a lot more underlying, which is the risk. And like I spoke about the demographics, I think there is a big change in the demographics and the next generation economy, which is largely becoming more user-centric. When they talk about user, not only consumer experience, but also about how you look at it from a utilization standpoint. So you talk about a sharing economy, you talk about gig economy. I think these are something which is pretty new. So nobody wants to pay for full service right now. Like when we typically sell insurance or a banking product, it's all fully priced in many ways. Now they're talking about an incremental pricing, something like, I take for a ride, so can I get my ride insured? Kind of a stuff. Actually, I think these are changes that are driving fundamentally changes in the industry, and this is the way even the financial services industry is looking for their own investments because they look at their investments. How do I put money, which is going to create long-term value for the insurer or for the bank or whatever else, whoever is going to invest you. And there are other modes of investment, say like a venture fund or a pension fund or any others who are investing in those instruments. So in a nutshell, there are three elements when you look into the financial services. One is the trust and the security, and primarily the ability to manage the risks. Because any decision on finances that you take, there is an element of risk. So how secure against those risks are going to be the key when you make those decisions. I'm just trying to set a context because all of these things has an impact on the disruption and the technology. So like I told you, it's primarily about managing risks. And risk is just not about one, it's about multiple manifold. Actually, one is a market risk. When you talk about a market risk, I think the largest element of a player that we know is the stock markets. Either we do it independently as an individual buying and selling stocks or through a mutual fund or through any other pension funds whom we participate and they in turn participate in those markets actually. So there is an element of fluctuation that happens in those bonds or in equities that we do, which is pushing up or pushing down. And we have recently seen volatility driving markets from one extreme to the other. And there had been erosion of wealth in many ways in certain stocks. And the credit risk is primarily arising out of the individual's ability to meet his obligations. And that's an industry on its own. For example, the CRISIL or any similar rating agencies in India does individual credit rating. And there are industrial or credit rating for companies as well. Who gives you the scores in terms of how secure or how sound you are from your financial standpoint. And even those rating agencies give for countries or what is called as a sovereign risk. I think these are things that are an industry on its own, which deals with large amount of data. And how you manage your operations. Today, the operational risk is a bigger issue actually, because there could be a lot of insider threats. Insider trading, insider threats, because any market, any company that deals with money, there are a lot of people who have access to information, and there are regulations about how to use those information for personal good. I think those are things which could put into trouble. For example, we recently saw SVB, one of the premium bank in US, completely going broke overnight for some good reason, and the directors of the company encashed their money, encashed their stock much ahead of the crash. So I think these are kind of risks which are good examples, where the regulators are always trying to catch up actually. And all these things lead to what is called as a compliance risk. How compliant are you to ethics and practices, and what is a disclosure and things like that. I think this gives you an element of an idea about how to manage the risks. So there is a huge amount of technology that is being put to use in terms of defining those risks, managing those risks, and pricing those risks and things like that. In fact, I was part of my previous organization where we were leaders in the risk area actually. So I think the risk itself is a data-driven, algorithmic, and you name it, anything. I think it's a cutting edge of the industry actually. So how big is the challenge? I think important to understand. As an individual, it may look silly, but I think when you look at it from a macro perspective, even a country like India, which is still trying to become a global player, we are probably around 1/10 of the US market right now, less than that actually, around 8% of the US market. The size of the global financial markets, when you look at it, is around 450 trillion US dollars. That was as of beginning of this year. And the kind of frauds that are happening around the world is around 6 trillion. It can be bucketed into many, which is an investment fraud, accounting fraud, market manipulation, cybercrime. I think this is a bigger addition to the entire gamut of frauds that are happening around. And the impact of the fraud is well known. It impacts people, reputation, government, and outcomes, and even business and industry. I think we have seen banks going broke because of the fraud being done, because the entire creditworthiness is gone, or the finances would have been drained, or people might have put it at risk. There have been banks which had been merged with others, or because of the frauds and things like that. I think there is a history, when you really look into it, about how banking frauds had impacted industries and economies, actually. That will be a topic on its own. So you can broadly bucket them into the impact of fraud has an impact on volatility in terms of, because it directly influences pricing and behavior, because any fraud has an impact on consumer behavior, which is leading into volatility in the markets, and which in turn drives a lot of things around the regulation, because immediately the regulators try to rein in the downslide of the markets and put in controls. So which again becomes mainstream, which requires intervention by almost all participants and players. So it's a kind of a cyclical scenario in terms of one driving the other, which again leading into a lot of disruption potentially from a financial services market actually. So ultimately, the supply chain, when they talk about the supply chain in the financial services, it's about finding the money and finding the customers. Okay, I think this is where it boils down to. And it's very, very hard for you to really get both of them tied up and make a bigger presence. So I think that's where the large players have they really take pride in having millions of customers so that they can diversify their portfolio, they can diversify any risk of flight of capital, and they try to balance between the demand and the supply. Because for a bank or an insurance company to make money, they need to take a long-term bet on investment. So it's not like you put in money the next 1 week or the 1 month, you get your interest back, or your capital being appreciated and things like that. So insurance companies, for example, take a 30-year view on a country or a economy or a bank or an industry or a kind of a portfolio and manage their portfolios. So the supply side, though, you need to have long-term instruments, which will really bring in that kind of money for you to manage the investment portfolio so that you can assure a steady return on their investments back to their participants or to their investors. It's a very dicey war. So on the one hand, you always struggle to get your customers, which has the capability to trust and invest in those institutions. On the other hand, you will try to struggle on an ongoing basis to really find the right investment opportunity and take a bet and get long-term dividends or long-term returns or yields on an ongoing basis. And today's war is all about getting the right information and looking at newer opportunities and going beyond. I think that's where the challenges are, and that's where technology is being put to maximum use. So let's come to the digital side of it. So this gives you a macro perspective of what is happening in the industry, but let's look into the other side of it and why this becomes important. So one of the buzzwords, even in the introduction, we saw that there is a fintech. So we'll talk about, explain about what fintech is about, and the growth of big data and the use of AI. I think all these things contribute in one way or the other a bigger idea around this called a fintech or a disruption. And the changing competitive landscape, which we saw right now with some of the industry players getting big time into various activities. And the new buzzword is probably around innovation. Fintech and innovation go hand in hand, along with technology gives you the kind of scale and competitive advantage that you can think around, because perhaps no other industry can use technology better than financial services, because there are banks or insurance companies today who is not seen to the naked eye or to the people. They may not even know where it exists, but they are in the apps and the mobile and the internet world. For example, there's a company called ACO in India, which started only a few years ago. It is one of the largest personal insurance companies that you can think around. Almost every product that they have is a digital product, actually. And their valuation is a couple of $1 billion, which I will talk about in the innovator space. So one thing which is common into all this digital disruption is there is an obsession on the customer, the relationship, and their acquisitions, and so on and so forth. Whether they use technology, whether they use conventional methods, say like telecalling or customer service or whatever you may call it. And so how do they get that little amount of customer obsession? That's what we need to understand, particularly in the new age area that we are talking about. Because today, like what I told you, there is a fine line of disruption, or you almost every financial services firm today, the competitive edge is the technology. If you talk about some of the leaders in like India, for example, HDFC or State Bank, for example, even in the regulated, public sector banks, say like State Bank, one of the largest IT spenders. LIC, for example, they have a very large IT spend, for example. And ICICI, for example. I think these are told the way almost anything that you can do, you can literally do it on the mobile, you can literally do it on a browser. And I don't think post-COVID, many of us may not even have walked into an ATM, for example. I think that's the kind of transformation that has happened in the financial services space, even in India. India leapfrogged into the technology area. So in terms of looking forward, I picked up one of the interesting predictions from Gartner, which is bucketing this into 4 areas, because whatever technology that we see, you can really apply it in many ways. One is not only for enhancing business, but also looking at the individual and also looking at what you get as an experience, which I call it as disruptions in business, actually, and their experiences and the customer on the work and productivity. Actually, these are 3 areas that you're looking at it, and you can look at it in whichever way you can look at it. When you talk about a smart world, almost anything that you do is now mobile enabled, or anything is a matter of convenience today. Today you talk about doing it anytime, anywhere. And that has an impact across the various stakeholders, whether it is an employee or whether it's a customer or whether it is an organization or even for a regulator. I think these are the 4 stakeholders that we talk around in the financial services industry. And it does have an impact when we talk about being smart. And the other thing that people are expecting today is amount of transparency, and of course the opposite of it is the privacy. Today we know that we are bombarded with SMS, emails on things that from people whom we don't even know. That could be a new entity which is setting up a business and they're trying to do a digital campaign. selling their products and services in the financial market, or whatever else that could be. So how do you ensure that your information is not shared? How do you ensure that your data is not privy to somebody else's servers or access to their digital stack and things like that? I think so one on the one amount we are talking about transparency in their operations, but at the same time trying to protect the privacy. Actually, that's quite a challenge and we have seen this consistently. There is a cyber breach almost every other day, and including Indian companies, none of us are really. We may be the last to know, particularly if you're running an organization. Probably we are the last to know that your data has been breached. So there are established regulations about responding to a breach and reporting and things like that, but which is a topic on its own. But I think these are the biggest challenges of the disruption that we are talking about. Then there are other enablers that how do you ensure scale? Because when you launch a bank or a financial services or an insurance company today, or any intermediary, so the market is global actually, because we are talking about 120 crore people or 130 crore people. So how do you reach out to the 130 crore people in one go? So internet provides you the scale. So it's just not about being a browser. I think it's about hyperscale, load balancing, distributed computing, so on. So I think there's a host of technologies that are supporting the kind of scale that is required. And newer things are emerging in each one of these areas. That's where this roadmap becomes very interesting. And how to adapt to these things is going to be the bigger challenge. And the bigger problem is how do you ensure that I develop software as a participant and drive innovation and stay ahead of the curve? Productivity is going to be key. So what was possibly a mainstream technology a couple of years ago probably is losing steam right now because of newer process. For example, the generative AI that we are talking around is completely changing many of the landscape, but we are looking at it. So I think many things that we used to enjoy or we thought was relevant are quickly getting into some kind of a legacy in many ways or the other. What we call it as a technical debt. The technical debt is not only in terms of technology, but also people and processes as well. So how do you stay ahead of the curve is the biggest challenge. And some of the advances that we talk about today of an OpenAI is era that can we have something like a thinking machine? Because currently the AI can really do an image classification. When I read through an image, it can tell me nearly the 99% accuracy what that person is. If you take it to Google and go through your image gallery, I think it understands people and recommends you pictures with those people when you do the image search. Or even if you're in a search, I think it gives you an image-based search actually. Object recognition, we have seen this many times being widely used across industries also, or not only through your cameras, but also through your through the CCTV network and things like that. It can detect people from images. And there are other things, like vision. Today we talk about an NLP, like the natural language processing that we talk about. Almost we are getting machine ready. Machines are close to becoming responsive to what the commands are. But can it start thinking? I think this is the biggest challenge that the researchers are trying to address it. Hopefully at one day, this could be somewhat of a smarter machine that we can think about it in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the kind of prediction that we really see. And that could completely even do one more level of industry change. So in a nutshell, I think the emerging technology stack is completely rethinking as a technology manager, how we adopt it, and how to drive change within the organization and make it a lot more robust and focus on the customer. I think that's what we are really seeing. And like any other technology adoption, everything has its own pros and cons, not that it is free of risk. Like what it spoke about it in the earlier slides around that risk. I think we need to be conscious of how to manage it and take it beyond, actually. And the newer tools, what is important to understand is the availability of these tools are largely kind of democratic in the sense. So any student or any aspiring technology professional has the same access to those tools, wherever he is, whether he is in India or in the West or in any other part of the world. I think it has completely democratized the computing. So the focus is more and more towards innovation. So you are closer to the problem. You're running an industry or you're in whichever industry that you are in. I think you have a problem. You can really solve it using those tools. I think that's the kind of change that are happening. And I was just tracking some of these advancements. Uh, More than 3,600 AI tools had been launched since OpenAI made public. There was sometime, if I were to count it from, say, October of last year, say in the last 8 to 9 months, probably 3,600 tools had already been launched. So let's get into specifics of what this about financial services or this fintech itself. It's a combination of technologies. You're talking about innovative use of technology for solving some problem. And I just taken one example, which is basically a lending, actually giving you an idea about how conventional things have been done and how fintech can really help you to drive things a little more differently. Fintech is largely about an ecosystem play, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. So when you look into the fintech in terms of how things are done, you can think about it in three different ways. One is redefining the future of the enterprise. For example, if you're running a lending startup or lending, for example, as a bank, you're trying to do lending. Today, the biggest change that is happening in India is also called the digital lending. Or it could be either a peer-to-peer lending or it could be a digital lending, where the loan acquisition itself, which has been a struggle for the banks, is now completely getting democratized. So, but the basic advantage in a kind of a lending type of a scenario, which is a kind of, again, a fintech variant, is a digital first approach. So you never know whom you're dealing with, but you really see those advertisements and those clicks and navigate it and completely take a digital first approach to clienting, where you do your KYC. KYC is your know your customer. So you basically put in some of those basic information that is required. Those things are electronically validated. So which is leading into the transformation of sorts. Earlier, you need to go to a bank to provide you all those documents. Somebody will come to your house, physically validate it. It may take a day or a week or probably, if depending upon the type of organization, it takes quite a lot of time. Now it all can be done in a breeze, actually, less than 10 minutes. In fact, I had the privilege of opening a bank account in less than 10 minutes, sitting in my home, and I transacted my first online transaction in less than 15 minutes. And I had never visited the bank even today. Although I know it's a very large bank, I had never visited the branch, actually. So I think that's the kind of transformation that you're talking around. Whether it is the KYC or the lending or the payments, I think this is a great change and an opportunity. But the impact is, how do I drive our integration? I think the biggest challenge is to get into a cloud, and more importantly, cybersecurity, trusted and secure cloud. That's the key area. And try to understand what goes inside the big data that's coming around. It could be coming from various sources, trusted or untrusted, analyze it, come out, make sense out of it, make data algorithms around it, profile it before you really start acting on it. And some of the areas that it really helps is to leveraging the AI. For example, the risk profile of the customer. I know I'm dealing with a highly trusted, secure customer, so my rating may be high, or I may be trying to deal with a defaulter. I have an idea that my finances will be at stake if there is a problem. So you still a decision of the individual buyer, or borrower, or a lender to deal with the person. But those ratings and scores are available to you before you make those decisions. So I think there's a significant amount of change when an underwriting of a particular process is concerned. The challenges, like all we know, that there are newer skills to be learned, whether it is the cloud or the technology or anything around dealing with the customer remotely, things like that, and the need for trust, and most importantly, cyber threats. This is a common underlying theme that we really see in the digital bandwagon. Opportunities, we have seen the rise of unicorns in India and fintech space. There are, if I were to look at it from an Indian context, at least around 3 to 4 major payment providers own around 90% of the data of digital payments in India. I think that's the kind of scale that you're talking around. So digital or internet scale is probably you can achieve it in less than a few months or years. For example, when Jio went online, it used the India stack to achieve what others could do over a 3 to 5 year period. They could achieve it in 3 months, and they became the second largest digital operator in India. So which drives operational efficiency and customer experience. And customer experience is incidentally a two-way street. You do a good work, you get your feedback. And you similarly do a bad response, actually you also equally get a backlash. So the opportunity is shaping the future through innovation and largely providing customers data so that they can manage themselves. I think that's the kind of disruption that we've really seen in the enterprise. And it is a question of plumbing to your core systems. It could be a core banking, it could be a core insurance, or any kind of a mutual asset management system or anything around that you have. You bring your plumbing into each one of these areas through specialty providers, say like somebody doing a KYC or somebody doing a lead gen on a lending or a customer acquisition and so on and so forth. So each one of these things. I'll give you a flavor. I picked up insurance specifically for two reasons. It's one is I'm working on it, number one, and none of it are science fiction right now. I think we see most of these things already part of the main system that some of my customers are already using it, which has been recently gone live. I think the convergence of payments, convergence of identification of customers, identification of risks, underwriting, it's a very complex process. And what we really got is primarily a superior user experience, which would have been very difficult in an earlier year, actually. I think this is what we talk about changing the business and also talking about a different experience altogether. So redefining the future of experience is what you see it. If you are a customer from a business standpoint, we are talking about redefining the future of the business itself. So which would have been very difficult years ago. So because of the change in the technologies that we really see around, I think I spoke about cloud, AI, and big data analytics and all that stuff. I think you can see those things in action in the video which I really saw around. And the opposite of this is as an employee, because one of the major participant in this whole process is about as an employee working for those organizations. What does that mean to them? Actually, redefining the future of work. Today, it's all about a lot of things around hybrid work, taking the work anytime, anywhere, looking at algorithms to promote the work to you rather than you really locking in and things like that. So you get an alert that there has to be an action that needs to be taken around. So which means that you need to learn your skills and bring an amount of trust. Cyber security again is a major area. Identity is a major, and an impersonation is a bigger challenge, because the more and more you kind of make people to work from anytime, anywhere, I think the possibility is that the data could also be lost or stolen. I think these are things that are probably a bigger areas of threat. All in all, it's leading into what is called as a knowledge economy. I think this is where the industry is moving around. So I think I wanted to give you one very specific examples of what is even more exciting in the days ahead, particularly as an individual. I think, what is important, like what I told you, is everything what you do is probably now on a mobile. But when you look into the mobile, I think it's a host of technologies that gets into it, and which gives you a lot more problems than when you talk about, because you're trying to design some application. It's not only for a browser, but also for a mobile. When you talk about mobile is just not about a mobile device, but also anything which can talk to each other. So for example, if you're trying to talk to an EV, for example, an electric vehicle, because today the insurer wants to know everything about where the asset is. It could be flying on this road, whether it hit a pothole or whether it is had met with an accident, and so on and so forth. So it's all wired. Actually, there is a lot of amount of sensors, which again keeps talking to the server of the insurance. So now whether the insurer or the manufacturer himself, we will be in a position to make decisions based upon what he needs to do and bring it into control of protecting the assets. I think the insurance now has more moved into from risk mitigation to some kind of a protection. Actually, I think there's a quantum change. I think from a technology standpoint, there is a lot of technology, but from an individual standpoint, I think it is important to learn those digital skills. And one of the big change that we really saw after the OpenAI is creating those large language models. And recently, Bloomberg, one of the largest financial services firm based out of US, launched their Bloomberg GPT, which is significant for the industry itself. I specifically picked this up primarily for one good reason. It's completely going to change the way you look at the entire industry in terms of servicing or user behavior and so on and so forth. It's a subject on its own, but I just wanted to flag it up as a one significant change. And the whole area around the fintech area or this insurtech is probably around creating an ecosystem of players and participants who can add value. So you can literally put together a system with private players participating. Somebody could do a payment, somebody could be doing an invoicing, somebody could be doing the cloud, another could be doing a cybersecurity, and so on and so forth. And stitching together an application and providing that service to an insurance company or a distribution to an insurer would be the new way of doing things. I think we call that in many ways insurtech, or it could be a fintech from another perspective. And the bottom line is very simple. We need to innovate for the knowledge economy. There's a huge amount of stake that we think about. How we go around would be a topic on its own. I think innovation is going to be the driver of the future. All leading into an AI journey, actually. Today, like earlier days, it was about programming. Today, without knowing AI, I think you will be completely lost. This becomes important not only for the organization, but also for the individual. How you plot your AI journey is going to be a key important aspect. And this whole idea of a man-machine collaboration, in many ways, is already happening. Whether you talk about talking to a Siri or a Google Home, I think those are the kind of man-machine interfaces that is already happening. But that becomes much more wider as you really go into the new OpenAI era, actually. So let's come to India specific, because I've been asked to also talk about what can be done out of India and how does it mean to an individual. There have been a lot of big news coming around India, particularly from the global giants, McKinsey's, Ernst & Young. I picked up to deliberately these two large consulting firms who were gung-ho on about what India is about. And India 100, there is a big, you can go to Ernst & Young site and pick up download an article about India at 100. I think that gives you an idea about it's a 100-page document. I picked up those information there about India growing roughly around 7 to 8 times from where we are right now in the next 7 years. So what this means is we could be a middle income country sooner than later. That's what it could mean. And what this means is there is going to be an explosion of services in many ways. And financial services could be one of those biggest item on the cake. Actually, we are roughly around 15% of India's total services, total GDP is around financial services. That could potentially double up actually. Not only we are doubling up on the size, but also about the sheer volume that you are talking around. So it's going to be a huge explosion. And the indications are like the current UPI transactions as of May 23rd, they're already touching around 40% of the global payment markets actually. That's well known that India is a leader in the mobile payment space. So there's a vast amount of digitalization of the economy that has already happened. And on top of it, we are going to see 5G really coming into mainstream in the next 6 months at best. It's already mainstream in many cities, but I think largely the country expected to have a full 5G network in the next 18 months. The most important transformation that has happened to the entire fintech growth story, although we talk about UPI, this and all that stuff, is the India stack, which is probably never understood in a truest sense, because it gives you the kind of identification through your Aadhaar and make those interoperable payments a possibility, then trust through consent. Actually, these are some radically different ideas that India adopted, what we call it as digital public goods. No other country in the world had this idea of called digital public goods. And they created variants of the Aadhaar, the variants of the fintech evolution that we are talking around in other areas, say like health, now this ONDC retail that is coming around, and there are payments and so on and so forth. I think there are variants to this, around 6 different variants to this, is built around the Aadhaar itself or around the India stack, driving the innovation. And to give you a very bird's eye view of what's happening around, I picked up some of the key players. There are around 100 and odd unicorns. And unicorn is $1 billion valuation in India, out of which around 20% of them are fintech startups actually. And what they do, they build innovation around the core India stack. I think that's important. And what is important to understand is the top 3 players on the payments place own around 90% of the 96% of all the UPI transactions as of March, which was around nearly 841 crore transactions. That's quite a number by any standard. And they achieved it in less than 4 or 5 years, actually. So what does this mean as in terms of change? So innovation is at the forefront. You talk about any industry, there is a lot of disruption ahead. Challenges are many, like relevant skills, cybersecurity, capital, access to markets. Opportunity is going to be phenomenal, going through the roof, actually. I think this is what it means to you as an individual, or to anyone who is aspiring to get into the industry itself. The good news is I can really see the future of skills much, much easier than what it is, because today the industry, I picked up information from the public domain, particularly from the World Economic Forum and others. Almost everyone needs to be reskilled for sure, because what we don't know what's going to be the future. For example, the OpenAI was never a topic 6 months ago. So it's completely opening up a new era of change, actually. So there is a decreasing amount of demand for most of the routine, paper-related, back office, middle office kind of jobs. The more focus is around customer. So there is going to be newer jobs that are going to be created with technology. Certain areas, technology is going to augment. Certain areas, technology is going to replace people. But the whole area is, without knowing technology, the fact of the matter is, we have to master an element of technology for us to really stay relevant for the future. I think that's what is happening around. I was also asked to give some idea about how to stay relevant for quickly about how to get into some of those areas. We call this something like an hyper automation technologies, something like the machine learning. Almost today, you talk about all these things. You can learn it in mostly around 3 to 4 months kind of stuff going online. There are things like AutoML, almost many things are on an auto mode right now. I think you can, so long as you have a flair for picking up some technology, picking up the relevant sites, I think you can do a lot of these things much more quickly than it is. And there are a lot more sites which are even doing things like free, for example. And there are things which are very affordable from an online learning perspective. I think these are things which are available. So in a nutshell, what it transforms is you have technologies to transform to thinking for language, vision, and execution. I think this is where the whole hyper automation is leading into. In fact, there is a very specific request to talk about cybersecurity. I touched upon it briefly along in each one of these areas because like any domain, there are risks and opportunities. When you look into opportunities or anything, ease of doing a business comes with a risk, actually. And cybersecurity itself as a domain, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity because they are not only India, they are also pretty global, actually. I think so. Getting a cybersecurity professional can help you to stay ahead of the curve, being a future. The good news is there are a lot of hackathons and labs that are going around where you can really go around, get yourself staying ahead of the curve. There are bug bounty programs available where you can really get hone your skills. I think there are people who have built their careers around bug bounty itself. And more importantly, you can stay connected through some of these forums, doing what is called as ethical hacking and things like that. I think these are all things that you can do as an individual. So what is important to understand from a cybersecurity is about getting an orientation and developing an interest because it does impact you as an individual, not only as a professional, but also as an individual. This leads to the last topic of the day, which is the digital literacy. About as individuals, we are targets from various cyber gangs across the world. And to try to exploit our urgency and our requirement in many ways. And there are various ways that they talk around, something around what you call it as a phishing, or they send you some social engineering, what you call, you nicely talk to people either through sending SMS or through emails, try to get to send you a link, you click on it, then probably you have seen people losing their money from the bank accounts. Or they're establishing, installing some malware into your phones or into your mobile or into your computer devices and stealing the information. And the other way is to block your entire access through ransomware completely, or probably you are using some antique or some older hardware, which are all prone to what is called as a zero-day attack, which is not updated and things like that. These are some of the common areas where your devices are completely compromised. And so an element of literacy is absolutely required for you to stay relevant in a digital world, whether you are doing fintech or anything else. I think this is important. And the most vulnerable people are the ones who are in a state of urgency where they give away their mobile devices or computers to somebody else to really play around. I think then you have a larger problem. The common mistakes that you do is you share a pin of your mobile to somebody else, or you fail to change, or your passwords are inaccurate or weak, or which can be easily deciphered. I think you Google it. I think the top 10 passwords are widely known to almost everybody else, and we see that being used across this web. But one of the other things that you can do is also to look into your multi-factor authentication, for example, having your PIN being sent to a phone or an email before you can open it up, things like that. We can easily protect some of those things, but mostly these thralls are ignored because of our convenience, actually. And the number that I picked up from the net was around 363 crores lost in 2022. That could be an understatement. It could be much more because many people may not have even reported the amount of loss. I think I'm nearly done. I reserve my questions. I do have a set of questions, but I'll answer them. I think I'll leave it to the organizers to open up the topic for questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice presentation and explanation, sir. We have queries from the participants during registration and also in the chat
I
box.
have that with me, ma'am. I can
Yeah, ma'am.
answer that, but
Yeah, I will ask you one by one, sir.
sure.
So the first question, how make an app safe and secure for financial purpose if we use credit card details to track transaction and for savings?
Okay. See, I think that was a little dated question today because if you are doing it in India, actually, that is already addressed by the Reserve Bank. In fact, that was a pretty much of a bone of contention for many of the financial majors. The card information is not supposed to be stored on the servers. So I think that has been taken care of as of last July. But however, I think there are other aspects to this. The one is as a developer of software, I think security and coding are completely at opposite ends. I think important that we bring in secure coding practices to the development, I think in the first place. And once assuming that you've gone through this penetration testing and ensuring that the quality of codes are of a good standard, through the other thing is to look into authentication, multi-factor authentication kind of stuff. I think that's important because any identity, there is quite a possibility that the identity threat is a common enemy in the cybersecurity. Important that needs to be addressed too. And most importantly, I think there could be frequent logins that we may do for so many other reasons because we may forget the password from a genuine standpoint, or I may be logging in from another device, which may or may not necessarily allow me to do it. Things like that. I think then robust account management is important for you to really deal with identity itself. I think it's a combination of many things, and on top of it, all the data encryption of it. Actually, I think these are all things that really go into really protect an identity itself. I think that probably will help you to understand what the kind of the effort that is required for you to stay protected.
Thank you, sir. What are the changes expected in financial services?
Okay, the AI impact is already felt. If you take a customer servicing, for example, I think call centers already use a lot of AI, NLP kind of stuff, primarily understanding the flagging of a customer based on sentiments. To give you some examples where I'm already working upon. So when today it's all known that you have a regular call which says it's being recorded for quality training, things like that. But hardly in the earlier years, people had never used 100% of the calls for training in many ways. So today with technology, what is happening around, I can really figure out who is an unsatisfied customer and provide a real-time intervention to somebody else to act upon it based upon the sentiments that the customer has expressed. I think that's an example of how customer service can really improve or provide a legal intervention if somebody is, say, threatening to sue for a failed service or some of those queries which potentially may lead into some kind of a legal action, potential legal action, avoid any kind of a legal action. I think it's all about managing threats and risks. So I think that's one such example. If I take risk, for example, underwriting uses a lot of stuff on AI. I think there is enough amount of AI use cases where people are already using it. I think it's an on and on. I think it's already widely seen and data-led AI is already widely being used. And even in the case of computer vision, things like that, claims is already started using in many ways the AI-based vision-based solutions, actually. We'll talk about it, and I think I showed you a couple of one of the videos where some of these things are widely being used, actually.
Thank you, sir. Next question. What kind of domain knowledge should data analysts seek to gather in order to provide better insights with the financial services industry?
Okay. Because we're talking about disruption, and particularly fintech requires you to be aware of the industry that you're working around. So a combination of domain and technology is required. Whether it is, say, lending, payments, claims, or any industry vertical, that because it's important that you need to understand that. So you can't really wish away that I don't know, I am only a technologist or I am only a domain consultant kind of stuff. I think the convergence of both are important, number one. And as I really spoke about it, the fine line of what is technology and what is the core business is already gone. With all the disruption that is happening around. A technologist has to be as savvy on the business, and the business guy has to be as savvy on the technology today. I think that's important because, and we talk about a fintech. I think they speak the lingo of the business actually. So I think there is nothing like I'm one or the other. So it's important that you need to understand whichever domain you wanted to develop proficiency on.
Next question, sir. How can financial institution effectively balance the advantage of digital disruption, such as enhanced customer experience and operational efficiency, with the growing concerns surrounding data privacy and cybersecurity in an increasingly interconnected financial ecosystem?
Any convenience comes with risk. I think that is important. And the nature of the business of financial services is about addressing risk. And the moment you talk about risk, it's also about providing an element of trust, actually. So the moment you talk about trust, high trust, so cybersecurity really comes in. So, and it has its associated implications around how do you build systems around looking into trust. Because one of the common things that you really see when you spoke to a customer care executive in a call center, they ask you to validate few things. They like your last transaction or your name, your date of birth, so on and so forth, because they wanted to ensure that you're taking to the right person before you really part on information. So there are checks and balances under which you can really ensure that you're talking to the right person. But the biggest challenge is the insider threats, actually. So the insider threats could still address some of these measures that you talk about. So I think that's the reason. I think it's a combination of surveillance that we need to be really working on to address some of these perceived threats, and also about having robust controls and processes, which I talked about in the risk management area. The operational risk and the compliance risk are the key things for you to be really top about in a financial services world. And the fact of the matter today is around 20% of the IT budget goes into compliance and risk right now, addressing these areas actually.
Thank you, sir. Next question. What are your thoughts on digitization of currency and one world currency? Would it lead to more problems than it would solve?
I think it's a massive subject on its own. Certainly, I am not an economist to comment on those areas. But from an India perspective, I think the India Reserve Bank had come out with a paper on digital currency, which has been widely circulated around. And India is clear that these kind of Bitcoin type of things are being dealt with as speculative assets, not as currency in the first place. And India had come out with a digital rupee, because only a reserve bank or a central bank of a country has a domain on a currency. So obviously having one digital currency may be a very distant dream. I don't know whether that could be a possibility, but that could be a distant dream. And the fundamental factor for any currency is what is called as a fungibility. I think that's what is being addressed with this digital currency in India, actually. And that should not be speculative.
Thank you, sir. Next question. How do you think the new and upcoming AI technology are going to affect the financial sector?
Yeah, I don't think we are still explored the depth and breadth of what AI can do for any industry, more so in fintech. Some of the areas that I am presently working on, which are catching attention of people, are anything which could be touchless. For example, a touchless claim. Now, can I disrupt a claims process, which is heavily people and process-centric? into something more touchless. One of the common problems which, say, for example, in the insurance industry is cost of processing a claim, for example. Whether it is health or motor or marine or whatever general insurance is concerned, cost of processing a claim is the biggest issue. So how can you disrupt it with all this kind of a digitization? So if you India has the largest two-wheeler population. I'll give you one practical example. India has the largest two-wheeler population in the world, for example. We are the largest two-wheeler manufacturers. The average claims on a two-wheeler exceeds the premium in most of the cases. And for which you need to send a surveyor, you need to serve some kind of a claims adjuster to deal with that. It's much more expensive and time delay and extensive and delaying actually. Today, mobile technologies really help you to really understand what is an industry accident, what is it an accident is about, and an element of computer vision can help you to solve some of those things, making a quick adjudication of the claims and providing you information. I think touchless experience is something which is happening in its own way as far as India is concerned. Then there is an idea of called as an embedded services in selling actually. I think if you buy a railway ticket, for example, there is an element of an insurance covered as part of a railway ticket. It's less than a rupee today. So in a conventional sense, you need to know who your person is and ask those questions about what you do, things like that. In the current case, it's very much, we very much know who the traveler is and where he's going and what is he doing for in this next 2 hours or 1 day of his train journey. I think those are all things like called as embedded services. When I look into the, say, buying, for example, you go Amazon, Flipkart kind of stuff, somebody wants financing, the EMI-based buying and selling is it's already available as part of the e-commerce is concerned. So these are the embedded services which are literally completely changing the way you look into financial services, which is exploding what's happening from an industry standpoint. Customer acquisition, servicing, there is quite an amount of dramatic change that's happening in the fintech space.
Thank you, sir. Some of the questions from the chat box. As you mentioned, the line between traditional finance institutions and tech providers is blurring. Do you think we are moving towards a time where the use of technology like AI will become mandatory for business to utilize to compete in markets? I would also like to know what could be the implications of this mass adoption of AI.
The AI, although there is a lot of hype around AI right now, actually AI as a technology, as an idea, was there since nearly for 2 to 3 decades now. It's only caught bigger attention now because of all the democratizing the computing and the cloud. So I think it's an idea, it existed, and the financial services industry had adopted automation to the core long time before. I think it's not a question of AI. Automation has been a significant driver of change for years, much before the AI becoming democratized right now. So whether you like it or not, I think these are things that will be continuously tested, available, and will be made use of by all industries, more so in financial services because of the wide implications that it can do for almost every stream of work that you can possibly think. So you have to be tech savvy for you to be staying ahead of the curve and in the industry, particularly in the fintech industry.
Thank you, sir. How blockchain technology could promise us a trusted financial service?
Okay, so the blockchain it's been there again for years now. But more than the blockchain, I think important to understand the Web 3.0 as a concept. Actually, Web 3.0 is about what we call it as a creator economy, where the current is what we call it as a Web 2.0. So the big tech owns the data. You create the data, but the big tech owns the data. But this is exactly the opposite of it in the Web 3.0, where blockchain could be a component of use actually. So where you create the data, you want to monetize it. Actually, I think the industry is trying to understand that and where the consent-based architecture is emerging, and particularly there are certain industries where consent is becoming mandatory. I think that's the way to go around, and that how to monetize it, that's something to be seen. So the blockchain as a component of this entire monetization of a data could happen at some point of time, but it is still a fundamental way of changing the way business works. Actually, it's not about technology, it's about how you really look into your business and what technologies that you wanted to adopt it to make it work. So Web 3.0, blockchain go hand in hand together, but that's completely a business transformation that we need to understand. So blockchain could fit into that kind of industries which wanted to adopt to those kind of areas actually.
One last question, sir. With the widespread adoption of generative AI like ChatGPT based solutions, do we have any potential emerging use cases in fintech's domain?
Quite a lot actually. See, the chat GPT, what is happening is almost many of these things, so it's something like a personal assistant to many of the people, I think. When I've been, say right now I'm in Chicago, for example, I've been talking to customers on some of this impact to their businesses. So what I really see is many people have started adopting the paid services itself. It enhances their productivity in many ways, in responding to customers and responding to many things. And we also see in the usage of it through standard mailers, writing smarter mails and things like that, auto responses, things like that, or even writing context sensitive responses to through chatbots and things like that. I think we have started seeing elements of it coming into integration part of their AI bots driving those conversations. So it becomes a lot more personalized as opposed to what it could be. In fact, the Bloomberg GPT that I said is primarily arising on those lines, where there is an element of personalization and that is coming around. So although we talk about it from a generative AI, the opposite of the generative AI, which is largely widely an internet-based model, to something what is more called as a knowledge models are also emerging, which is very localized to the industry that you're talking around or to a company. For example, the Bloomberg is a 100-year-old company, and they have a huge body of knowledge which needs to be captured. So this kind of a transformation of the legacy debt, which in terms of which we might have ignored for a period of time, is now in the domain of this language models, which are transforming those industry knowledges into to their own competitive advantage. So we are going to see variants of the chat GPTs being dumbed down to the industry or to an enterprise. I think that's probably what is going to happen. The amount of disruption is already happening there. I think everybody is trying to adopt it. You can see it in every other industry, say like legal or contracting, for example. Legal and contracting is something there. This kind of a chat GPT kind of a stuff can really make a difference. Even other adjacent industries, say like medicine, which really talks about a lot of stuff which requires you to do drug discovery and so on and so forth. Actually, I think these are areas there this can make a significant amount of change.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the participant? You can unmute and you can ask to the speaker.
I understand there are many students, no? At least one of them can ask, right? A few of them can ask questions.
They are clear about it. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful question and answer session also. Now I request Mrs. Mythili Prakash ma'am, Chair, Computer Society of India, Chennai chapter, to formally propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Akita. Good evening, all. We had really a wonderful, very useful session evening today. Chandramali sir, you have done a very good research on this topic. the way you present it, proved it. The sequence you have made it about this presentation is also very excellent. Changes
Thank you,
in
ma'am.
financial services and then managing the risk and return. As you mentioned, digital literacy is very much lags behind. It is very much required because we are in the starting stage of using digitalized jobs. Still more awareness is required.
Right.
Yeah, that's really surprised about 3,676 AI tools launched. So this it is obviously the new launch previous backlogs will be updated and it keep updating itself. Even then, as you mentioned, more than 300 plus crores fraud has also attempted. It's the ongoing things. People should also be very alert and things has to be taken care by ourselves. That's the way you have presented that you have taken
Right.
up the example as insurance is excellent example you have taken in that as so the empowering consumer and that helping people to manage themselves is a challenge. They have to. They must because we have still in that practice of take it granted
Correct.
and sympathy and trustworthy and all. So that awareness should be there more. It's really a very good presentation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
ma'am.
your time. And
Thank
also, I would like to thank that joint societies for your ongoing support and our members and the participants and with our questionnaire session is also more interesting, which gives some more additional information regarding that. Thanks to all. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice
Thank you.
day.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, PVS sir, for organizing this wonderful session.
Thank you, sir. I thank
Thank you, sir.
Chandra sir
Thank you,
to
PVS.
accepting our invitation.
My pleasure, sir.